Hey, so welcome back. Today, well, or rather as a recap of yesterday, basically I've been implementing the base data models using Alembic, and also started implementing the core of the application, as we can see here. So just to kind of show you, and the reason that so I'm using Flask 2.0 for this, and I know Flask has an extension that we can use, Flask Migrate, which lets us also define data models and basically, perform database migrations there. And if I remember correctly, it's actually based on Alembic, but I didn't want to use Flask Migrate because that will actually tie all of our data models to the Flask application directly. But I don't want that because I want the database management and the look at the database management side of it to actually be separate. And so I decided not to use Flask Migrate because that way, if the database needs to be split up or if it needs to be extended and different parts should go in different services or whatever, then, it wouldn't be super good to have that all be like a big dependency of the initial or of the core Flask application. And so with Alembic, it's a little bit easier, in my opinion, to kind of move these things around. Just the database models. Here they are. So I split them up into like the different ones, which is exactly the ones that we've seen earlier. We've got the comments model, the core, which basically just declares our base so that we can reuse it, different events or the two events tables here. We've got the posts. Excuse me. We've got the posts, the sites, as well as relevant site attributes, for example, like the user site follows and the user site admins, as well as our users table here. So all of that we're kind of just importing so that we can use that. And our different models here, if I close all this again. So with our different models here, we can just use Alembic to do our database migrations for us. That way, I'm also running a local Postgres server. It's relatively easy to set up if you don't have one set up. All you need to do is, I think you can just type in like Postgres download into Google or something, and then you just, download the engine or the executable for it, and then you can just install it, and basically you just run just an application, and you can actually have your own local Postgres server, which I like to do. I know you can use like an SQLite database too for testing, but I think it's pretty easy just to hit start on the Postgres server, and then I can just use everything exactly like I would if we're using Postgres servers downstream too. Set up a local just environment file too, so that I don't need to like retype these things. And then, building out the main application. So basically all we're doing here is just importing the application. What I wanted to do is use an application factory pattern, but I ran into a problem, and if any of you have encountered that problem and found a solution, please do let me know how you did it. But the problem that I ran into is when I was creating my application factory here, and I didn't really extend this that much because when I started doing it, I ran into this problem, is that because our database models are defined through Alembic, we actually, if we go into our models here that we register for Flask, then we don't actually, I'm reflecting the models here. So I'm basically, and where is that? If we go to the init, here we can see we're like reflecting the source of our table so that our model here, or our model engine here, can kind of pick that up and we can use it. Because I don't have the models defined here, I have the models defined here, but I don't want to like reference these because I may want to move them elsewhere. So I just want to kind of assume that they live in the database server, and from there we should be able to read it and get all of the model information. Now the problem is, if I have this component here where we reflect the database, then if I put that in the application factory pattern here and we import the database and the models here, and we try to select a table, we don't actually get it because, well, the database isn't like reflected yet because we haven't created the application yet. So yeah, that was kind of like a weird issue to deal with. And I saw one response on Stack Overflow like it worked, but I didn't quite like it, which is within every single route, when you're actually using these database models, you don't have the import statement at the top, but you actually have the import statement like within your different routes. And I didn't want to do that because it just seems kind of messy. So yeah, if anyone has, encountered something like that and you figured out a way to solve it, please let me know. But yeah, so anyway, that's kind of why right now it's not using application factory pattern. But aside from that, I'm still trying to use like blueprints and everything, even though this probably won't get very big, but just because. And then, yeah, I started working on just like the authorization endpoints of it. So just trying to go with like the login and register and log out, because this is the first time that I'm actually using the reflect part rather than actually, when using Flask, creating the models directly with it using Flask migrate. So I just wanted to make sure that all of that reflection was working properly, which is why I started with the authorization. But also, actually, it's pretty important to have that authorization done there so that we can create an account and that we can then submit posts, because you can only submit posts and you can only submit comments from a registered account. So I feel like either way I would have started here, but I definitely wanted to start here because, I wanted to make sure that our model initiation or the model reflection that we have here, that all of that is working properly. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of like where things are at right now. We've only got the login as well as the logout components defined. And I don't think there's much else. Let's see. Yeah, I haven't written any tests yet. Not much to test yet. But yeah, once the core login functionality is there, we can write some tests to like create users, just make sure all that is working properly and stuff. But yeah, okay. So I think the next thing that I'm just going to work on now is just going to implement the registration process, so that someone can create an account, and then I need to test the whole process of registering and logging in and making sure that all of that is working properly. So I need to plug in my laptop here. I lost control of my mouse. There we go. Okay. All right, yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. So I think I already created a form for it. And yeah. The first thing I think was this email validator, so I'm quickly going to look up what extension was needed for that. Because I'm pretty sure it did not come with a Flask WTF and the Bootstrap. Oh yeah, I'm also using Bootstrap for like the front end side of it, so that it looks at least a little bit presentable. But again, not too worried about that. But yeah, right now let's take a look. What we're using is Flask WTF, Flask SQL Alchemy, Flask Login, Flask Bootstrap, and Green Unicorn to be our WSGI. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are, and then of course Alembic, and of course Flask. Okay, and this one we also needed to install to make sure we can properly use SQL Alchemy with Postgres. So let me see what library here we need to install to get the email validator working. this. Let's test if it's this one, because the last time I used it, it was throwing an error for me. So let's try that again. Okay, let's see. And okay, so yeah, we have implemented the register endpoint yet. We also need to implement our register form. There we go. Okay. Just take this over directly and create our form, which is going to be our register form. All right, now we have to process our form data. So we're going to, well, one thing that we want to do also is we want to make sure that the two passwords I think that we have here are the same. So we'll have password 1 equals form dot password dot data, password 2 equals form dot password repeat dot data. Okay, so in case our passwords don't match, then we should do this. Then we need to create our user object. So our user is going to be, we're going to have the username. I'm pretty sure I wrote it with an underscore actually in our data models. And I defined users as users, form.username.data, and our email is going to be form.email.data. And let's see, is there anything else in our form? No. All right. And then to set the password, we've actually, we're using this library to kind of set it as a hash so that we're saving hashes. So we're going to go into our routes and we're going to say user.hash password, and we're just going to put in password 1, which is what we have from above. And then now we need to make sure that we don't have, well, I guess we could have done this earlier too, making sure that we don't have a user with this username already or with this email. Users.query.filter by username is equal to, I'm just going to define the usernames up here. Username, as well as also defining the email up here so that we can just reuse that. first is not none, or users.query.filter by email equals email.first not none. Actually, I think these should be separate so that we can have separate error messages for it. Flash, please use a different username, and we will just redirect to the home page, to the register page, and here we're going to say, please use a different email. So we're just checking if a user with this email or with this username already existed. Part of our database models actually, I think our database models already account for this because we have unique conditions on both our email as well as our username. So we wouldn't be able to insert it anyway into our database. However, this way we can give a little bit more clear of an error message rather than just failing the insertion. Okay. Okay, so then we have our user, and then we can do db.session.add user, and then, we didn't import. From app import db, db.session.add, try db.session.commit. So we're going to try to create this user, accept db.session.rollback, and we're going to flash error encountered while creating the account. And maybe for now, we're just going to catch the general exception without, doing specific cases. And we're going to do import logging. Where were we? Logging dot error